Hello, people. My name is Detroit Miracle. Yes, and indeed, right now I am here to have more fun Star Wars conversations. This is specifically about Chancellor Palpatine or Senator Palpatine right before he was elected into the chancellorship that way. I'm not talking about when he became Emperor Palpatine, but rather when he was the chancellor. Like some things didn't make sense, but you said, oh, well, it's their way of doing it. It's their type of politics. Like, first of all, it didn't make sense that they would need to give him emergency powers to make military decisions. That didn't make sense because if he was the supreme chancellor, then you need him to be able to make all types of crucial decisions without being chained or binded or bound down by a restrictive clause or something. That didn't make sense that they would limit the supreme chancellor that way, especially when anything could happen in a galaxy. For example, they could have gotten invaded by the unknown regions. It could have been another interstellar race that sends thousands of giant starships to invade that galaxy. And they have formidable weaponry and things. That's why they're saying that Emperor Palpatine thought big as far as building destructive weaponry, because he foreseed any type of danger, or he foresaw it. He didn't close his mind to the possibility that those things might happen. Then that explains him wanting unlimited power to make unlimited decisions or do whatever he wanted to, regardless of what people thought, and he wouldn't have such shackles on him that prevented him from doing whatever he wanted. But they were saying during the 20 years of his reign, until the Death Star got constructed fully, he was bound down by Senate restrictions. Like, so they still had a Senate that had to make key decisions and votes. And so the Senate stood within itself as a long-standing tradition that they couldn't just simply rid the galaxy of. Oh, and that's one of the reasons why so many people, persons, and things defected into the Rebel Alliance, where they had 1 million more cells of people that are willing and were willing to fight for them. Because, yeah, when the Death Star was destroyed, people took that as a weakness sign to the Empire, that they built the most destructive thing, but a small band could make his way through and shoot a shot off, which leads to a chain reaction explosion. So more planets were not as fearful of the Empire as they recently was. Like, Vader was mad at people in general and persons because they wouldn't give him information on the Rebel Alliance. So, you know, he hated the Rebel Alliance because it was his task to destroy the ship that destroyed the Death Star, and he failed to do that. You know, of course, Luke had help in ways. He had help with the Force, with Han Solo, but nevertheless, Vader couldn't stop that, so he bared the shame of it. Yeah. So, you know, with regard to Palpatine needing emergency powers, rather, I suppose it fit in line with the Republic deciding not to give the elected chancellors supreme and ultimate power and authority. So that would indicate that they put restrictions where they wouldn't have military power in terms of making crucial military decisions, but they can make social-wide decisions on a galactic effect and a galactic way where it reaches thousands of worlds. So the Chancellor had almost supreme and complete power, but they lack something as far as not having a military or having control to start and create a vast military. And then even with those even with those emergency short-lived powers, they would eventually have to return those powers to the proper authorities. So the chancellor couldn't keep emergency problems. That indicated too, that chancellors were going bad that stayed in office too long. So, was that the case? That's another thing that didn't make sense. Like, they didn't trust chancellors enough to give them absolute power. But they trusted them only to a certain extent to give them enough power to do their job and for a short term. They said Palpatine remained in office much longer than he should have. So that would indicate that his term was up in 4 years. Maybe the chancellors were elected to 2-year terms. So it's something that went wrong in the past with chancellors to the point where they limited the time that they can spend in office. So that makes sense if the chancellors were prone and susceptible or so to going bad. Like, if many chancellors was abusing their powers along the way, then that would give the persons, peoples, and things just cause to not completely trust them. So you figure that in there. But if you can't trust the system completely, then why not make improvements on it, even greater improvements? Like, if you don't trust limit their powers even more, like limit their powers to the fact where they have public consent to do things as well outside of the Senate. Like, make the chancellor's thing where they were bound to the Senate and the general publics. If you can't trust them enough to give them military powers, But yeah, I'm sure you think about the conditions within the new republic, you would find a lot of things questionable. But that is another story. All right, folks, thanks for hanging out with me again. And I'd appreciate it if you would give me those likes, comments, and please subscribe to me and my channel, which is Detroit Miracle.